Guys, I'm going to be going live with a Q&A in a second, but I wanted to start off with a chat about exercise. Should you exercise if you have sciatica? And I'm just trying to find the definition here from the Oxford Dictionary, but I'll go through the off-the-cuff one because I know we've written about this before. And the definition of exercise is a physically exertional activity that is working towards a health goal, right? And that's quite important in the context of physical activity anyway, because we could obviously have an exercise which is a mentally challenging activity that is driving us towards a improvement in some element of mental health, maths, etc., etc. And the reason I wanted to cover this first and foremost is because we can just switch microphones over to the correct microphone on here. Which seems to have been disappeared. There we are, lovely, we've got it back in. The reason I wanted to cover that first is because I just saw a comment today, and we get it all the time, where people are going, do you know what, it's all well and good, I've got bad sciatica, I can't do exercises because I've got such a bad spine down here. I've got a disc herniation, didn't you know? I've got a disc bulge, didn't you know? I'm going to A&E, I'm going to the hospital, I'm going to go and see this clinician. I can't do any exercise because I've got a bad back. What if exercise makes me worse? And this is a real misunderstanding of what you should be doing when you are doing exercise or rehabilitative exercises. Granted, if you're just going to go over there and mess around with that dumbbell and try and do some Zercher squats or something like that, that would be unwise. But one of the most important things you guys can appreciate if you're struggling with sciatica, if you're struggling with a herniated disc in your lower back, is your rehabilitative exercise, when you're doing it with the correct intent, is literally the safest thing you will do in the 24-hour period, bar sleeping, right? There's every chance that you getting up out of bed at night to go to the bathroom is what sets off the next flare-up. Why? Because you're not focused on getting out of that bed. You're focused on going to the bathroom. And so the action of getting out of bed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night while you've got bad sciatica is more strenuous, more precarious, more likely to result in flare-up than you carefully doing your exercises. Especially if the exercises are the correct sort of exercises and being instructed to be done in the correct sort of way. This is a very, very important concept that so many of you guys need to break if you're struggling to recover from these bulging and herniated discs. Because too many times people say, well, I'm not going to do anything. I don't want to make it worse. And if you're getting out of bed in the morning, your bed is probably lower than this chair is right here. Right? Your bed is probably lower than this point, although it might be at this point, which means you're having to get out of bed. If you are doing careful rehabilitative exercise, you will have an appreciation that your current squat depth is maybe just here before you lose composure. The notion that practicing this is more risky than getting out of bed to go to the bathroom is one that we need to reevaluate. If you are carefully going about your rehabilitative exercise, you are 100% focused. You might be doing doorway squats where you hold onto the doorway and then you go down like so. You're focusing on aggravation-free repetitions with correct choreography, because sometimes the exercise you're doing, if you do it incorrectly, you might be setting yourself up for failure later on. So you have to get correct technique. There are many exercises, when done incorrectly, can not necessarily be painful for your sciatica or aggravate your sciatica, but they are a problem because you are learning a bad habit. And the reason we select the specific exercises that we do as part of the rehabilitative process is that not only does learning how to do a squat or a hip hinge or a step up have utility for the long term, but they are also movements you are doing every single day. But the difference is when you get up out of your chair and you're like, my sciatica is so bad, my glute hurts, my hamstring hurts, I can't even do X, Y, Z. You're still going to get into the car and go to the hospital and sit in the waiting room for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time, then see a specialist and then get sent home with some pain medication and said, well, it's not that bad, just go home and it'll heal on its own, or something to that effect. So you were willing to do all of that. Why are we not willing to carefully, for example, lie on the floor, hopefully you can all see me, and do a core engagement and just do that, right? You might well be doing it wrong. It might well flare you up, but like from an objective point of view, there's not a significant amount of force on the underlying tissues that are injured, right? So you probably should do this on the bed instead of the floor to start with. But doing that, if you can't even control your core when doing a much dumbed down version of the dead bug, what is safer than that? Like going to the doctors and sitting in the office, going to the clinic, coming here and sitting in the waiting room before you go is less safe than practicing that at home. So there needs to be this thorough and honest reevaluation of this fear of doing something productive and messing things up. Sure, you might well mess yourself up. But if you've just gone, I'll just do some exercise, well, that's not an appropriate way of doing things. We have to set about going and say, right, I've got a plan. I've got a structure, I've got a program that I'm going to follow. I've got tutorials that I'm going to be leveraging. Because quite frankly, watching someone explain how to do things on a YouTube video is probably more appropriate if you're in a lot of pain right now than going to the clinician to go and see them. What's more is you're more likely to see someone that may not necessarily be that good if you're limited to the people that you have to see that are in your geographical location, right? That's something else to bear in mind. And so watching tutorial videos and learning how to do the thing before you do it makes sense, right? It makes sense. It'll help you have more success with these kind of things rather than run the gauntlet and risk messing things up. But make no mistake, you're doing things every single day at home. Every single day, no matter how bad your sciatica is. Even if you're in that very, very bad state where we're struggling to even get up and do that much on a daily basis, you're doing stuff every single day that is making the problem worse. And you're willing to do that. So don't inappropriately demonize exercise and say, I can't do that until. I can't do that until I go and see someone, until I do this, until I do that, because you are doing stuff every single day and it's holding you back. Oscar said, can you show a safe exercise for the tricep with the dumbbell? To be honest, Oscar, I would just be focusing on using a cable system or bands and just doing a standardized tricep press down. Super easy, very, very simple, much, much better. With the dumbbells, you're going to have to, get over into a position, just using literally a cable system and just doing a tricep extension like so, perfectly reasonable. Of course, you can do like over the head stuff, right? You come over the top like so, but the problem is depending on shoulder mobility, that kind of stuff, you might be arching your back a little bit there. You can also do that variation sat down as well. So a couple of ideas there for you, Oscar. But I'd say just using the cable system would be the best option. Jeff said, hi, should the knee go past the toes when squatting? There's no reason the knees shouldn't go past the toes, but often we have to have appropriate form, right? So there's going to, depending on certain individuals, right? So it depends on the femur length and the torso length. Some people will naturally find that their knees go over their toes more than others when they do a squat. This is not a problem. If it is a problem for your specific knees because you don't have the strength to do that, over time you will get better. But there are so many opportunities, and a great source of information on this kind of thinking, Jeff, I would go and check it out after this, is the knees over toes guy. It lays out the fundamentals that you're going to go through daily life where your knee is over the toe. Right? And you think about things like, was it the ACG split squat where coming down like so, and then coming back up, etc. Like there are scenarios where you should be strong in all ranges in the knee joint, right? Now, a lot of people are very, very weak. So if you're going down through the squat and your knees are going over toes and it's creating that shearing and you're not capable of dealing with that, then you need to make it easier to the point where it's not aggravation and then build up tolerance. And that can take a long time. So for me specifically, when I started jiu-jitsu, sorry to go a bit off track, but I will come back to the questions on TikTok in a second. When I started doing jiu-jitsu, one of the things that you have to do is you have to do a shoot where you're coming forwards like so, and that obviously puts a ton of strain on the knee. So at that time, when I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was squatting about 140 kilos reasonably comfortably, but when I was doing my squats, I was only doing like traditional squats, right? Coming down to a reasonable depth, 90 degrees, a little bit lower, but I'd never really worked in that range. And so these shooting movements that you do, coming down like so, they really do bother the knee a lot, right? So I went up and I tweaked my knee doing jiu-jitsu because I was new and not very good at it. And doing that knees over toes stuff, slowly over the course of many months to years, it has really improved, I would argue, the strength and stability of my knee. Now, I still get injured doing jiu-jitsu because anyone can get injured doing jiu-jitsu, right? But the recovery, as you guys will have seen, those of you that have been watching, I tore both of the cartilages in my left knee, just a freak accident at jiu-jitsu before the last competition. That was in June, and I'm still able to mess around doing all this kind of stuff, and I've recovered, I would argue, pretty quickly because the strength is there. You can't stop accidents happening, right? But when they do happen, the conditioned individual, the strengthened individual is going to bounce back a hell of a lot faster than those that just haven't been doing any of that work. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense, and that's helpful for you. A couple more comments coming in, but Jeff, fundamentally, I'd go and check out some of that information, but your squats should be aggravation free, and if they're bothering the knees, then sometimes we need to adjust things a little bit. What other questions have we got? We've got quite a few coming in, guys. I will do my best to go through all of them on here. So on YouTube, we've got from the hip hinge, would you progress to the conventional deadlifts or stay with the Romanian? What's the benefit of conventionals, if any? Etienne, you need to be able to pick stuff up off the floor, right? So I would argue progressing onto the deadlift is going to be a sensible option. We literally have just been shooting some videos that leverage the sumo deadlift, right? I think we did a full YouTube video actually on this exact topic, progressing from the hip hinge or Romanian deadlift onto the rack pull, which is where we have the safety bars in the rack. So it's like an elevated deadlift. So we're not lifting off the floor, but we're lifting off an elevated platform, and then progressing onto the conventional and or sumo style deadlift from the floor. I'm definitely in favor of doing that, right? Some people take the angle, oh, deadlifts are bad for the back. No, deadlifts done incorrectly are bad for the back. Nothing is bad if it's done in a correct way and we build strength slowly over a period of time, long period of time. And so the answer is, well, if you think deadlifts are bad, how do you pick up your toddler? If you think deadlifts are bad, how do you pick up that bag of compost at the garden? If the deadlifts are bad, how do I pick up this band from the floor? I can't pick it up because I haven't done deadlifts, so I can't pick that up, right? It's just how much of a deadlift are you conditioned to do? And I would argue you need to strengthen yourself up, right? You need to strengthen yourself up. And so I think deadlifts are a perfectly reasonable option. Vlad has said, how can you do the bridge without a flare-up of back pain? You do it with controlling your spine. So we discuss these kind of things, right? The marching bridge should be done with control. A lot of people, when they do the marching bridge, they kick their hips up too high and arch their lumbar spine, which is a failure to control the lumbar spine. That is incorrect technique. So if you're experiencing pain when you do any of the core five, right? The marching bridge, the dead bug, the squat, the hip hinge or step up. If you experience pain or are not technically doing these correctly, then you need to learn to do them right because you're not controlling your core correctly. And if we can't do it lying on the floor, then how are we going to be stabilizing our spine in the real world? Very important. So you practice, Vlad. You leverage some of the tutorial videos that we've got. You leverage some of the troubleshooting videos. One little tip that can work really well is using the towel. So we take the rolled up towel. We don't roll it up the full size. We take this rolled up towel. So it works. This is a great one for the dead bugs and for the marching bridge. For those of you that lose control, that find you arch your lower back. You pop the towel there. Obviously get into this position more effectively. This is not the correct way to do it. You'd get in on your back and then slide the towel in. But we get that towel there so it's filling the void between our back and the floor. And then when we do our marching bridge, we come up and then we go into the marching. Or if we're doing our dead bug, we come up and go into the dead bug. Why do we do this? Because the towel acts as a sensor. The towel, you can feel the pressure of the towel. So you can feel whether your back is lifting off or you can feel whether your back is pressing in. One of the mistakes a lot of people make with the marching bridge and the dead bug, for example, is that when they do them, that old habit of doing these pelvic tucks till kingdom come creep in. And so they do a pelvic tuck and then lift up, and that's incorrect. We should not be doing that. You're probably lifting too high off the floor as well, is another little tip for the dead bugs. Eric has said over here, I have a diagnosis of sequestered disc, herniation at L5S1 on the right. These kind of details of whether it's poked out and gone down or something like that, they are important for the surgeon, but you know you've got a disc injury. That's where things, I would argue, stop. Do you have any recommendations for this case? You have a disc injury. Working on the spine stabilization work is what you need to do. Whether the disc is going off to the side here like so, whether it's going up a little bit or down a little bit, is quite irrelevant for you from a rehab point of view. It's relevant for the surgeon because if he pokes a hole in you and goes to chop it out and finds that it's up here instead of down there, then that's obviously very relevant for him from a clinical point of view, so he can execute the procedure in the most efficient manner. But for you, it doesn't change your rehab one bit. You still have to do the rehab because the thing that you're rehabbing is not the bit of disc that's poking up here. The thing that you're rehabbing is the annulus fibrosus that has been damaged that allowed the fluid to leak out. And so it doesn't change. This is a mistake. Once I've got a diagnosis of, the only relevant part here is I've got an L5S1 injury. That's all you guys need to know fundamentally, or that's all you guys can act on. You can't act on whether it's 8 mil off to the left or 8 mil off to the right. Now, you know, the presence of emergency symptoms. I hate to cover this every single podcast, but I'll cover it very briefly. The absence of the emergency symptoms is what we need to validate. So you need to be mindful of having any of the, the cauda equina syndrome, saddle anesthesia, loss of bladder and bowel control, that kind of, you don't want that, right? If you've got that, you need to go and get it checked out with urgency. But most people, the vast majority of you guys don't have emergency symptoms. We've got a disc herniation. And Eric, who's got it on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, sorry, and it's going up 2 segments or upper segment, and John, who's got it on the left-hand side at L4-5 and it's going down a little bit, like, that's quite irrelevant. You're both going to do the same rehab. And quite equally, you could have 2 people, Eric and Eric's twin, who have exactly the same written instructions of their MRI, exactly the same disc, and they might have 2 different sets of symptoms. What do you do with that? It's quite irrelevant to what you do going forwards. You both do the same rehabilitation work because you both need to rehabilitate the injury at the segment. Where the fluid goes once it's sequestered is quite, you know, it's neither here nor there in many ways, right? It doesn't really inform your rehabilitation work in any meaningful way if we're talking about recovering from the injury. Now, if we're talking about quirky, funny positions that you might be able to get into, like this or something like that, and hold, and all of a sudden you've got no pain, like, that's not healing. That's a funny little hack that you'll see on social media to get rid of the pain in 3 seconds, you know, and that's not what we're interested in. We're interested in actually fixing you guys, helping you guys get better, get stronger, and actually recover with objective measures, not funny little quirks or hacks that kind of feel good in the moment or anything like that. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. On TikTok, what have we got? We've got 5 days post-op microdiscectomy trying to heal the nerves now with physio. Assuming the nerves weren't damaged specifically, and if the nerves are damaged, then we're going to have symptoms that are going to resolve over a very long period of time, which is perfectly reasonable, right? Sometimes people will have, this is 660 triple. Some people will have their microdiscectomy. We have members that have had this over the years. They've had a microdiscectomy and they've got some bruising to the nerve is the easiest way to term this. And they just have these symptoms. They've got that tingling in the big toe and it's just there all the time, right? That's a scenario where we've actually damaged the nerve a little bit. So if you've got that, that's going to just heal really slowly. You're not healing the nerve. You're just allowing the nerve to heal on its own, right? Your main job is helping rehabilitate the disc that's been damaged, that's just had the bit chopped off. Because in the case of the microdiscectomy, there are 2 problems. The microdiscectomy addresses the more superficial. They're suggesting that this bit of disc that's bulged out is pressing on something it should not be pressing on, and we're going to remove it. Right? That is not the problem. That is not what has been injured. What has been injured are the layers of annulus fibrosis that held this bit in here. So these are the things that need to heal. That's what you are working from a rehabilitation point of view, learning spine stability work, etc. Unfortunately, if you're going about your physio and you're doing like rounding and bending the lower back, then we're creating potentially a little bit of trouble here. Charles has said on YouTube, I have a tumor irritating the S1 nerve root, symptoms that of sciatica. Charles, you've got to go and get the contribution to your symptoms of the tumor that needs to be addressed. Can you, like that you need to go through that with your oncologist, of course. It might well be, and it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that you have that occurring, and the doctor have said, you know what, it's benign, we're just going to leave it there, or we're not going to take any action. I suspect maybe to the contrary, but that needs to be taken care of, right? You need to take care of that. However, you can have that going on there and you can have mechanical insufficiencies at the same time. So just bear in mind, those 2 things can exist. We can have a headache and we can have a broken toe at the same time. And so while the 2 things might be occurring, in this case, very unfortunately, Charles, I hope you've got the help that you need for this from the oncology side of things. We can deal with that, but also acknowledge that we might well also have some degenerative change, some issues at the L5-S1 as well. So something to bear in mind there, a little bit of a more uncommon case in that particular scenario. But I would argue even in that scenario, doing elements of the rehabilitation work are going to help protect any vulnerabilities that we have to the lower back. What else have we got here? Just comments through on, gone too far, sorry guys. Do you agree, Fabio said, do you agree on jiu-jitsu for spine health? Whereas, no, I do not. And jiu-jitsu is not something for health and well-being. Jiu-jitsu is something that we do because we're maybe a little bit misguided and want to do that for a number of different reasons that do not include spinal health at all. Right? Jiu-jitsu, you can't make the case that being someone that does jiu-jitsu, right, you can compete at jiu-jitsu, as you guys know. That is not something that you're doing for lumbar spine health. You need to be aware of the challenges that it has, and that's very important. A has asked, is cryotherapy good for herniated disc? So it's not so much that it's helping the healing, the cryotherapy here, very important. We talk a lot about contrast bathing, which is using hot and cold, alternating hot and cold. The reason we're doing that is because inflammation, which is a good process and helps us go through the healing process, when out of control or unmanaged in these small areas around that herniated disc, are going to create congestion. And that congestion can irritate the nerves and that can create symptoms. So we need to manage the inflammation in this region of the lower back effectively. And so contrast bathing, icing can be helpful. It's just making sure that if we're going to one of those cryotherapy chambers, if you're finding it's helping, great, right? If you're in there for a bit too long, it might be a little bit too much, a little bit too severe. So you might find that actually doing something directly over the lumbar spine, just literally with the cold pack, is going to be a little bit more effective. That being said, I know many people find the cryotherapy stuff helpful. It's just understanding what it is doing and what it is not doing, is managing the inflammatory process, helping you in that vein. It is not healing your disc. Cryotherapy is not healing your disc. Your body heals your own stuff, right? No more would you say that cryotherapy is healing the burn on the surface of your skin. Your body is doing the healing. It might be creating an environment to help healing take place more effectively, or help healing take place with less barriers, let's say. But you do the healing. You do the healing of the herniated disc. And then healing, which evolves into strengthening, and it's difficult to demarcate where that healing finishes and strengthening continues, but you must be using your rehabilitation work, your strengthening work. That is what is guiding that strengthening process. And again, where does healing stop and strengthening take over? Well, that's difficult to actually make any kind of objective statements on where that might be. But does it even matter? No, it doesn't really matter. What you're doing is strengthening. You're strengthening a damaged tissue into a non-damaged tissue into a stronger tissue. And that's what you do from your rehabilitation point of view with your strengthening-based exercises. Tommy has said, I injured my lower back on a trampoline a few months ago. Now I have knots and lumps in the lower and referred pain. I don't know exactly what you did on the trampoline, but again, Tommy, it's just focusing on the rehabilitation work. That's going to be what you want to do to rebuild strength and stability and maybe steer clear of the trampoline for a little while. Which sport could help me with spine rehab? Fabio, you don't need to do sports. Sports are hobbies. You need to do rehabilitation. You need to do a back rehabilitation program, a spine rehabilitation program. And then once you have done that effectively, you can go and do sports for enjoyment, sports for entertainment. Sports have all sorts of challenges to them. And generally speaking, the sport involves taking the system that you have developed and challenging it in different ways. And so football, rugby, swimming, tennis, golf, you name it, there's going to be pros and cons with all of those things, but don't believe that they are there to build health and strength. They are for enjoyment. That's what sports are. They're recreational activities. And so that's worth bearing in mind. I mean, you could potentially say that some sort of like high rocks or CrossFit might be something that potentially would be something that would more in alignment with keeping things healthy. But even that done to the level that a lot of people do it is arguably got some disadvantages as well. You're taking your body and you're just challenging it as much as you can in a competitive environment. So sport in general is done for recreation. And the idea is that you build conditioning so you can go and have fun. And you can enjoy yourself doing all sorts of things. Charlotte has said, sciatica down both legs, any advice? Well, one thing to distinguish is it down both legs all the time or is it down one leg and then the other? The main advice is sciatica is not the problem. The injury to the lumbar spine that is at the root cause of the sciatica is the problem. If we're going on the proviso that sciatica is the problem, then we're going to do things to release the sciatic nerve, which might be detrimental to the underlying problem. So for example, we have a herniated disc in the lower back that is irritating either directly or indirectly by way of inflammation, the nerve roots that go on to form the sciatic nerve, maybe more so on the left than the right, etc. And so we have the sciatic symptoms down the lower back. If we're thinking it's just a problem of the nerves being irritated and that is the problem, then we might reasonably do a knee hug to open out that space. And now all of a sudden it feels nice. But if we understand that that is a second order effect of the disc herniation that I have here, the knee hug now seems to make a little less sense. And this is the point. This is why there's conflicting information, because people are working to do different things. If you're getting advice on people to fix sciatica because sciatica is the problem, then you're going to get a different set of guidance, a different set of activities or exercises or priorities compared to if you're talking about someone who's dealing with the underlying problem. And failure to distinguish between those two things is why there's so much confusion around the topic of back pain and sciatica. Synovial cyst on the facet joint in L4-5, nerve pain, surgery or physio. I suspect if we've got a synovial fist and we've got these kind of synovial cyst, and we've got these kind of symptoms, it's not just the facet joint. Most of the time when people have these kind of facet joint cysts or other bits and pieces, it's a segmental issue. Most back pain is a segmental issue. We have injured, yes, I talk a lot about the discs, right? But you can't injure the disc that's having some kind of impact on the facet joint capsule and on the ligaments that run between the spine. The best level of analysis for you guys is the segment is injured. Work on making progress on the rehabilitation process and ask yourself the question, Nikki, where are you at in your rehab? Are you able to squat or hip hinge with a reasonable amount of weight, or does the thought of doing that scare you tremendously? And if the answer is the latter, then get working on being able to perform those movements. And do that and give yourself time, give yourself a good bit of time and a good bit of instruction to make progress on the rehabilitation front, and then reevaluate how much are these things bothering me on a daily basis. Oh, I'm starting to feel like I'm managing my symptoms a lot better. I'm starting to feel like I'm objectively capable of doing more load on the squat and hip hinge. I've made some progress there. The progress in your symptoms, the resolution of your symptoms of back pain and sciatica, irrespective of the diagnosis, come from you progressing through the process of rehabilitation. It is not that you feel better so you do more on your exercises. It's that you progress your exercises so you start to feel better in the real world because you are more resilient. You're protecting that injury better. The mechanism of action in your rehabilitation is that in the first instances when you're learning exercises to control the midsection better, to control and protect the spine, the mechanism is that you make daily life safer because you're no longer aggravating and irritating this section of the lower back so frequently through the day with absent-mindedness and getting caught up and tripped up by things you don't know you didn't know. So that means that healing can actually start to take place and not be interrupted every single day by you going down to feed the cat like this, and instead actually you say, well, the cat can actually jump up onto the side, so I'll put the cat food up here instead for a little while, right? Or you take a knee to do it. So there's less spinal bending involved. You focus on maintaining a neutral spine, etc. And that's how we stop aggravating this so it can go through a healing process while making progress on movements like the squat, the hip hinge, and the ability to control our spine. And then we build that strength and stability in those same exercises, like the squat and the hip hinge, for example. So we become more resilient. And when we have to pull the bin in, maybe because they've taken the bins out and you go and have to pull the bin in, as you go to pull the bin, you've got more control so you don't pull yourself funny. Or as you're walking with the dog and it chases after a squirrel, you're a bit more braced, so when they pull you, you hold yourselves together and it doesn't set off another flare-up because you're more resilient. You're not healed, but you're more resilient to the stuff that happens every day. And then you progress your exercise and your rehab on further, and you actually objectively go from being able to squat a 5 kilo weight like this to an 80-pound kettlebell. Maybe you're using this one and you're able to do that without any trouble, and you're able to walk it back, to put it back on the side without any trouble because you can brace and control your spine. And the same load is going through your spine, but you're actually objectively, measurably stronger. And as you go through that process, you're out having a chat with your friend and they go, gosh, Nikki, you're not complaining about your back. We've been walking for the last 10 minutes and you haven't said once about that sciatica going down your leg. And then you go, oh yeah, I guess it is feeling a little bit better. I guess it is. That's where it comes from. You don't magically get better so you can do more in your rehab, right? It's the wrong way round. It's the wrong way round. I've got a question on Etienne. Following your advice against tucking the pelvis on certain exercises, would you say hip bridges or hip thrusts should be avoided, even introduced further along the rehab process? So we talk a lot about doing the marching bridges as an exercise in the early stages on the floor. A great control. You're challenging your body to maintain stability and shifting load from one side to the other. But I do not think that the hip thrusters are a good idea, the barbell hip thrusters. Primarily the reason for this is that getting into the position to perform the hip thruster, well, I may as well show you guys because I've got it more or less set up anyway. So bear with me. Demo time. Oh, knocked something there. Okay, so why a hip thruster is a bad idea? They strengthen the glutes, etc., etc. Hopefully this will become obvious, and maybe if you see me setting it up and you notice the problem, you can post in the comments, right? So it's got a little bit of weight on here. Now, generally speaking, you won't have the weight already set up like I have. We were doing some videos earlier today. So generally speaking, people are choosing hip thrusters because they can do a lot more weight than they can on other exercises. So make of that what you will. So I've got myself set up here. Roll into position. Hopefully you've already spotted the main issue. If you've got terrible sciatica, probably don't have the flexibility, like me, to sit in this position without rounding your lower back. So problem number one, we do our lovely hip thrusters, boom, yeah, we've done them, that's great. You know, I'm strengthening the glutes, strengthening the hamstrings. I'm gonna pop myself back down and have to round my lower back. Is that worth it? Is all of that worth it? And the answer should be a resounding no. What's the point? What is the point? We're overcomplicating things. Now, granted, if we have in the gym the hip thruster machine, I'd still make the statement that early on in the rehab, what's the point? Do your squats and hip hinges. Do your squats and hip hinges. You can keep a neutral spine. While this exercise can be great for building the glutes, so can a squat and a hip hinge. Unfortunately, like, we see too much cool stuff online nowadays about you do this exercise to build the glutes. And then you see, because some of the guys like Brett the glute guy, puts out some really great information, like tons and tons of research. And we've got his book, thick like that, tons of references, really, really good. Would definitely recommend it, right? But in that, sorry about that sandwich truck, you can see it's not like the squat doesn't activate the glutes. It's not like the squat doesn't activate these muscles. Yes, the glute bridge might do it a little bit more effectively, but your focus is not being a bodybuilder, going on stage and having glutes that are, 25% more developed and having that aesthetic. Sure, later on that might be your goal. But right now, people with basics that fundamentally can't do the basics are worried about which exercise is going to get an extra slant on the glutes. Just focus on doing the simple stuff. Adding in this other extra stuff is completely unnecessary. And so it's how we do the exercise precludes it from being useful for those of you recovering from low back pain. Your squats and your hip hinges are going to do great. They're going to do just great for building a significant amount of stability. And if you get to the point where you've really made some significant progress, you're doing your body weight and more on squats and hip hinges, and you want to add something like that in, crack on, because by that point your back won't be a problem. But for the time being, focus on the basics. We all too often get that shiny penny syndrome, and we say, oh, that cool exercise, that looks fun. I saw it in a reel and it looked really cool. But a lot of these things, we're majoring in minors, as the phrase goes. The basics, they're not sexy, but they do really work, and they're accessible to absolutely everyone. You don't need any specialist equipment either. Carmen on YouTube has said, I have an L5S1 extrusion, 3 disc fragment, and I have pain in the right leg. I performance exercise slow. Not sure the comment there, but a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, Carmen, is going to be very relevant to you, just like the other comments on the L5S1 discs. Adam has said, I have never stopped working out since my injury, but due to the nerve compression from my extrusion, my left leg simply is unable to exert its full strength until the nerve becomes decompressed. Yeah, I mean, if it's compressing the nerve all the time and actually compressing it completely, then that's very relevant, right? But if it is, well, often you'll find that it is contacting the nerve. It is very infrequent, and that's not to say it's not the case here for Adam, because it might well be. But when you guys look at the MRI, especially down in the lower lumbar spine, there's a lot of space, right? There is actually quite a lot of space. So the prospects, or the likelihood, that disc bulge is coming out, I'm trying to get a good angle to see, and taking this nerve here and pinning it against the wall like that, if it's doing that, you're going to have pain basically 24 hours a day. One of the reasons you may be struggling, Adam, to exert that spine, exert those muscles, is because we're actually not very good at stabilizing the core. So whenever you try and drive through those, instead of a nice strong spine, as you try and drive, you tweak the spine a little bit. You're not creating a good base. And this is one of the things I don't have any clue about Adam's case specifically, but sometimes people will say, well, can I do the leg press for a while because or can I do a belt squat? There's another one, right? It doesn't put any load on my spine. And all people do is serve to create more disparity between the strength of these versus the strength of this. So when they try and drive through that leg, the spine bends a little bit, kills the power because we do actually irritate the injury, and we find that there's this disparity. Now, some people do have that constant compression of the nerve, and I always remember a guy, this was years ago in clinic, as a student, and he was so well developed, but he had significant nerve damage to a specific nerve as a result of a lower back injury, and he had no muscle. And I'm talking about, this was a stick, this was literally a bone. His lower leg was a bone. There was no calf muscle whatsoever. But he's still training and doing all stuff in the gym because he just managed to do it. But unfortunately, he didn't deal with things things weren't dealt with in the right way, and it was a bit of bad luck as well. I can't remember the exact details, but I remember he had really solid quads and just no muscle. It's gone completely because of that nerve compression at that moment. But that is incredibly rare, incredibly rare. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Have a look at whether we're actually engaging things correctly, Adam. There could be a number of different variables there to think about. And if you need more help, guys, if you do need more help and you've been struggling through this stuff on your own and you're not really finding you're actually making progress, I would strongly suggest you guys have a look at the program. I've put it in a link to a video in the chat on YouTube. And guys, those of you that are watching on TikTok, you can always go up to the link up here. click the profile and go over to the link in the profile page and watch the video there. Like, you don't need to do this on your own, try and figure it out from stuff on the internet. You can have a structured program and go through that without worrying about whether you're doing the right sort of stuff, and also having support along the way. It makes the world of difference. 5W Tech has said, all the exercises, rehab really puts strain on the muscles, stiffness, DOMs, reduced ROM. How can I safely stretch the hamstrings, quads, and lower back? So we have the core relief section of the program where we talk about these kind of things, and I talk about it freely and regularly on the lives here. The core relief work is relief work to take strain off the tissue. So we're doing hamstring stretches, we're doing some glute stretches, we're doing some hip flex stretches with a neutral spine. Very important. So many people do not do them like that. We can leverage massage guns to help manage those sorts of things. Stretching for the lower back should be decompression stretching for the lower back, such as the towel decompression, such as the bed decompression. Again, there are videos on all of these things. Those are the things that we do to manage. We do relief work alongside our phase 1, 2, 3, 4, our rehabilitation, our strengthening work. The relief work is done daily, consistently, like brushing your teeth. You do it every day, even though you haven't gone to the dentist today, right? And then you go to the dentist every so often. Okay. And we've got our strengthening work. Our strengthening work is what builds strength and resilience. Our relief work plays a role in relieving the stress and strain on the lower back that is there from daily life and from the exercises themselves. Oscar says, is it okay to do a row with one leg on the bench or the back? My personal preference with the rows is to single arm dumbbell rows, is to set them up like so in a tripod row. So where you've got 30% going through the arm, 30% going through the leg, 30% going through the leg, I'm nice and strong, my back is nice and stable. That is the best option. I think when you're doing them, as is being described here, like, you can do them like that, so but I'd come out to the side more. This is a more based position, like so, rather than like some sort of weird, like, I'm gonna fall off, right? This is not a very base position. Whenever you're doing those kind of things, you want to tripod yourself so you're really quite strong and quite stable, rather than, someone could come over and push you over. Oscar, hopefully that makes a bit of sense. That's a cool profile pic, by the way. I like that. What else have we got here? How should I do, this makes me sad, gym work. Then Fabio, we've got tons of resources. If you're struggling, go and have a look at the program. Go and have a look at the program, because you posted on a couple of these lives, right? It sounds like you are struggling. Go and have a look at the program, get stuck in, and then we help members get back into these kind of things. Focus on the rehab, and then you can get back into doing the other sports you want to do because you enjoy it, right? You might be going hiking with family. You might be going, doing all sorts of other things. Tommy has said, doing the hip hinges at the time doesn't hurt, but hurts about 3 days afterwards. Like, if your hurts when I arch the bum out. So if you should not be arching the back, right? We're keeping a neutral spine. We're not arching, right? Neutral spine, not arching the lower back. Very important point of distinction, okay? And if it hurts for about 3, what else have we been doing, right? If we're doing a bunch of hip hinges, if we're doing like this, right? So doing that, 10 of those, and then what did we do the rest of the day? Have a look at what we've done the rest of the day to have a more effective evaluation of what might be the problem. Because if we've done that and then we've gone and sat down, this puts more load objectively through the tissues. It might be that you're not necessarily, Tommy, doing the right sort of work from a point of view of relief-based work to help manage the stiffness. It could be that actually you're doing the hip hinges correctly, but the stiffness that you get in the hamstrings then creates a restriction in the hips, which aggravates the lower back, in which case we're not managing a normal part of the process effectively. So the stiffness in the muscles that have been worked is not managed well. And this is why there is strategy around this. It's not just go and do the core 5. It's not just go and do the strengthening. You have relief-based work, like we just mentioned with reference to 5W Tech's question on YouTube. You have relief-based work that works on those muscles alongside your strengthening work, because everybody's going to get to a point where you're going to get some element of DOMs, some element of soreness in the muscle, some element of reaction to the workout, which is a perfectly normal part of the process, but it needs to be managed and preempted effectively. That's why we discuss these sorts of things, right? This is why the program has so much education. This is why we bother doing these live streams, because all too often people are interested in, oh, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? But what can you learn and understand? Because the education makes the world of difference. So then you're pre-framed, you know that there is the likelihood that at some point in this recovery process, maybe sooner rather than later, you're going to start actually working muscles. And a perfectly normal part of working a muscle appropriately is a bit of delayed onset muscle soreness. And that needs to be managed, because if it's not, then it's going to get in the way of hip mobility, which is going to restrict the hip mobility, and therefore that means more movement is going to go into the lower back. So you finish doing your hip hinges and you did them textbook perfect, then now you're sat in the office like this for the next 4 hours. That's not going to be good. Sitting in the office is the problem. And remember, you guys are often joining, you know, this kind of scenario with back pain. So it's not like you start doing it on Tuesday afternoon and on Wednesday afternoon you feel pain-free. You're still doing many things and you've still got an injury there. It doesn't heal overnight. We have to drive that process, and the way in which strengthening exercises work is first you have to actually be competent enough at them to then do them effectively at a level that actually challenges the tissues and leads to change, and that change is what helps support the recovery process. Danielle has said, from the thigh pain, middle dull ache, locus for months, every day when lying down. I'm not sure about the details there, Danielle. See if I can find anything else. Kaylee has said, degenerative disc, in chronic pain, surgeon states the only remedy now is spinal fusion. Kaylee, I would strongly suggest having a look at some of the rehabilitation stuff we talk about over and over again. And understand, you might say, you know, I've done physio. Every single person, more or less, that has ever joined the program has done physio before joining. Precisely what we've been doing is really important. Precisely how we've been doing it is really important. You guys watching this, it's not like you've never done a squat before. You've done a squat, but how you do the squat in the moment is important. How you do the squat from one session to the next is important. And how you do the squat over the next 6 months is important. If you don't get those things right, then you're right. You might be doing the squat correctly today, but that's not going to actually build you anywhere because you're not actually challenging yourself. And you need to understand that process changes over time. You can't do 10 squats today, aggravation free, right? And you're doing this. 1, 2, oh, I've got no aggravation, and expect that doing 3 sets of 10 for that for the next 6 months is going to take you anywhere. By definition, you need to identify things that you currently cannot do and then work towards being able to do them and then move on. That is rehabilitation. Otherwise, you're just doing something on a daily basis. You may as well be flipping a coin. It's not actually progressive. And that's one of the cool things about the program. Like, you've got objective markers you will increase over time. And doing that is what drives the recovery process, as I mentioned earlier on. Making progress through the process, rehabilitating yourself, is what results in you going through the healing process and being able to do the things you want to do again. It's not something I wish to go ahead with without exhausting every avenue. That's surgery that Kaylee's talking about, and that's very right of you. I would suggest send us a DM because we've got a video on surgery, but I've essentially covered it. You need to do the rehab work first. And to the degree some of the stuff that we talk about is novel to you, hasn't been done before, hasn't been done effectively, I would suggest checking out the link up in the profile page and having a look at the program. Raquel has said, would vibration machine help my spondy? It's not going to do anything. What is it doing? We have to think about this, right? I don't know what we're supposing a vibration machine would do for the spondy. So this is spondylolisthesis. This is a forward slippage. Now, could we leverage a vibration machine and do our exercises on the vibration machine? Well, that's a very expensive test. The thing is, you don't need that. You just do the rehab work. You've got an instability at the level of the lumbar spine. You've got a reasonably objective degree of tissue damage. If we've got a spondy, whether there's a pars fracture, whether there's a pars defect, or whatever it may be, whether it's degenerative, right? And there's no defect, but it's just a degenerative process. We have an insufficiency at the level of the lumbar spine. You don't need to worry about vibration machines. You just need to do the basics. This is another example of getting bogged down with, majoring in minors, as I mentioned earlier. I'll use that one today. That'll be today's buzzword, majoring in minors. Focus on the basics. You're learning to do a squat, a hip hinge, a step up, the dead bug, the march, the stuff we talk about in the program. Learning to perform those aggravation-free with correct choreography. If you can't do the standard dead bug, then you do an easier version. And if you can't do toe taps, you do an easier version. If you can't do that, you lie on the bed and engage your core and then rebuild from there. There's nothing less strenuous than you can do than that. Straining on the toilet seat, getting out of bed, getting yourself dressed. You're doing all of those things every day. So you start at the level you can do. We need to find out what we can't do, but we sometimes need to start from a point of what can I do without aggravation? That's the thing that some of you guys really need to spend some time working on. And that involves doing. Do is the word. Do is an action. It's not think about what can I do? What can I do? Not can't, can. And then figure that out and then go from there. And we've got tutorial videos that break this stuff down to help you guys. Gary has come on and said, just joined, can you show me the hip hinge? So the hip hinge is simply just that. And to show you on here, I'll show you with the model first. Note the only thing that's moving is the hip joint. The spine didn't bend. That's all you're learning to do, is a hip hinge. Nice and simple, right? What it looks like from the side, you try not to fall over stuff that's in the way. It's always a plus. Boom, boom, right? It's not diving into a swimming pool, right? Hopefully you can see the extreme difference. I'm rounding my back going forwards, as opposed to, think of yourself like a drawbridge. This is the pivot point, the hip socket. My back is the bridge. The bridge doesn't bend over like a fishing rod. The bridge just goes down. And it's one that often people really struggle with. You need a bit of guidance, you need a bit of help. There are tutorial videos to help you guys do this. Sometimes you can use a band. A band works really nicely, right? For those of you that have them, you pop the band around your waist. You pop it on the front of the hip joints, like so, right? This is one of the disadvantages. Those of you that have done things like the back extension on the Roman chair, if you put the pivot point at the wrong place, you're going to buckle your spine. So when the hinge is in the right place, it means as we pull back, we can pull back through the hips, right? Because the band, the pivot point is on the front of the hip joint, and then boom, we go into the hip position. Often, people will put the band, or for example, on the mistake on the Roman chair is that they put the bracing on the front. So now I really focus, you can imagine, lumbar spine flexion, rounding the lower back, because the pivot is in the wrong place. So it's very, very simple, but a lot of people get to the point where they're standing there and they're like, it can't compute. I don't know, how do I do this? Like it's not easy. And that's a really great sign. If you struggle with the hip hinge, great. If you had a child like Celestia, she's learning how to walk at the moment or getting close. She's using the walker. She's hopefully going to take her first solitary steps very, very soon. But we don't go, hey, you fell down. Walking's not for you. Pick a different hobby. No, you encourage, you learn, you practice, you practice, you practice. If you can't hip hinge, learn how to do it. It takes time. But it's a great news that you can't do it, because if you've been struggling with back pain for a long period of time and you haven't been getting better, this could just be some of those things that you need to be able to master in order to get better for the long term. Etienne has said, any benefit to integrating the lower lat near the lower back in exercises like rows in the rehab program, thinking of overall back health? I think you can build that stuff in a little bit later, Etienne, because when you're doing things like the hip hinge, if you're holding the weight, you're going to be engaging the lats as well. If you're doing a chest pop, you're going to be engaging the middle fibers, the trapezius, the erector spinae muscles as you're doing that. You can't really not do that. If you're doing a proper hip hinge, the moment you start adding a bit of weight, which should be relatively soon, like the lats are involved here. They're not asleep, because if they were, I'd just kind of flop forwards. So you're using them in an isometric manner. Sure, you can build in some rows, but we talk about that a lot more in the phase 4 level. Get the basics right first and then build on those, because that just tends to be the better way of doing it in our experience. We actually we've had a very big overhaul of the program, and we actually pulled some of those exercises like the rows, and we pulled them a little bit later on in the program, because I think the essentials need to be done first. What else have we got here? At 58, your joints certainly are not old. by no stretch of the imagination is that old. You might feel old, but 58 is nowadays anyway. Being fused to the pelvis, no other options now. I'm 34. Gosh, that doesn't sound great, Stephanie. Surgery was successful, but I have a spondy and scoliosis, so I'm having my 3rd surgery. Hopefully you get a bit of guidance on the rehab front, Stephanie. What else have we got? 6 prolapsed and bulging discs. Gosh. What other questions have we got here? Etienne, so that makes sense. Guys, I'm going to keep going for another 10 minutes. I'm just going to have a look through the questions on TikTok, see if there's anything else. If you guys do have any questions, post them now, sooner rather than later. And guys, if you need more help, there's a couple of you guys that have been struggling for a little while, it seems, on the chat here. Check out the link in the profile page. Those of you on YouTube, check out the link in either the pinned comment or in the live chat. Have a look at that, because it really can help you guys get better. What else have we got here? Because I'll probably be going live again later this week. Stephanie said, it's really not great, but I'm done with living in pain. I'd rather be restricted and pain-free. Awesome. Stephanie, just make sure that you go through the appropriate rehabilitation work. So important. Start with the basics and then build from there. I would suggest you could send us a DM to the surgery podcast. Although we've had surgeries in the past, having a look at that gives you some idea of the kind of things that you want to have a chat with your surgeon about afterwards. You know, one of the big problems I have is that the guidance that we often get post-surgery is very, very poor. It's a case of go home, don't do too much, don't do any bending, don't do any lifting, try not to do any twisting, and give it X number of weeks or days or whatever it may be, and then you're going to have physio X amount of time, which includes bending and twisting. But anyway, and it's like, yeah, but you're forgetting that this human being is actually going home to live in a house on their own, and they're going to get dressed in the morning, and they're going to be going to the bathroom, and they might be taking some painkillers to give them a bit of constipation, so they're going to be straining on the toilet seat. Like, all of those things need to actually be considered, and to just say to someone, go home and don't do too much, when we've had something that, you know, is a surgical intervention that is, you know, really delicate and focused and precise, to have such imprecise post-surgical advice and guidance is quite poor. And that's why we say, you know, having a chat with the surgeon and going, hey doc, you're about to send me home. I've gone to the bathroom on my own. I'm assuming, you know, you'll be able to go through the details. Am I able to do squats? And they go, not a chance, you can't do squats. And you go, okay, great. How am I getting out of this chair to go and get in the car? Because you've sent me home. And how am I going to get off the toilet seat at home? And then they go, that's a good question. And you go, well, wouldn't it be a good idea? As soon as you've already seen me get up out of the chair, wouldn't it be a good idea for me to start practicing this? Because I may have just been fused, but just because I've been fused through the bones doesn't mean I have the strength and stability to support that fusion in the coming days, weeks, and months. And so maybe a little bit of education and guidance even before would be probably preferential, to learn some of those things so we can have the most optimal chances of success. I think the option of prehabilitation, so doing the rehab before you have the surgical intervention, can't be overstated enough. Like, it could be really, really helpful. Katie has said, will a chiropractor help my strained back ligaments? Understand that unless, depending on what technology they're using, assuming you're going to a standardized chiropractor who's doing the joint manipulations and adjustments, just like an osteopath, for example, maybe an osteopath would do a little bit more soft tissue work, so that's work on the muscles. The chiropractor cannot do anything to build strength and stability in your spine. You need to do that. The chiropractor can do many helpful things. They can get your thoracic spine working a little bit better, your hips, your knees, they can get your neck moving a little bit. All of those things can have positive effects on your lower back recovery, but you have to do the rehab. So what the chiropractor should say is something along the lines of, hey, well, I'm going to do some work in the clinic to help your body get working a little bit better, but that's going to complement the hard work you're doing at home with the rehab front. And then you're going to stress your tissues a little bit, you're going to go through your rehab, and then you're going to come in, we're going to clean everything up, and then you're going to go home and you carry on with your rehab. And I'm helping you help yourself. You've got the appropriate rehab stuff you're doing at home to build strength, resilience, and stability to protect those injured segments of your lumbar spine, and I'm helping you along the way with rebuilding that process, but you're doing the rebuilding. All that they can do for joint manipulations, etc., is adjust the segments to improve the mobility. They're not building stability, which is what you guys need to have banked or need to have, you know, in the pipeline alongside any treatments that you might have. And, you know, same thing here, Maggie's had an injection but not worked. What worked is really important, right? If you have an injection and we're under the guise that we can have an injection and not do any rehab, then we've been misled, quite frankly, right? You've got an injury. Maybe you've got a herniated disc, the L5S1. An injection does precisely nothing for the injured disc. Nothing. It does not heal the injured disc. So you walk out having that injection, you are not healed. And so if we go home and we carry on doing all sorts of things that are aggravating the lower back and reaching for the kettle, and we haven't been given any guidance, well, is it any wonder that we maybe have a day of relief? Maybe we have not, maybe we have less than that, like in this case. The injection or the treatment or the chiropractor or the osteopathy or the IDD, the decompression that we do in the other room, is the top part of the pyramid that needs to sit on the foundation of education and rehabilitation. If those things are lacking, all you're going to get, if you're lucky, is short-term pain relief. And that's because we're working to fix back pain rather than fix back injuries. Those two are very different. And those of you that have had that kind of experience, like Maggie, you've been going to see someone who's focused on your pain rather than the problem. And we could make the statement that the pain is the problem, right? And so often that is the case. We are not in good physical condition. If you injured your back lifting up the kettle or putting your socks on, you did not have good physical conditioning. Even though people attest to the contrary and say, I was fit and healthy. What is fit and healthy? Oh, well, I just walked a bit. Okay, cool. That's not fit and healthy. That's not strong. Evidently, the facts of the matter are you weren't fit and healthy and strong because you injured your back, herniated the disc, so to speak, by putting your sock on in the morning. That is not a display of a healthy, strong spine, unfortunately. And so we need to acknowledge that and go, okay, yeah, maybe you're right, maybe you're right. and now go about building strength and stability. Christian said, agreed. You explain the issues and solutions better than anything on YouTube. I appreciate that. Christian, you're too kind. You're too kind. Hopefully it's helpful, right? Hopefully it's helpful. Johnny has said, but don't need it now. So physio we do forever. I love this question. But when does the benefit of cold and heat finish? Is it a good idea to occasionally do that still long term? So a couple of comments on that. Number one, physio, let's remove the term physio, right? Rehabilitation is another word that sounds less scary for you guys for strengthening. Every human being should be doing strength training, period, right? You should be doing strength training. You should also be doing some element of work for your cardiovascular system, but strength training can actually act as a surrogate in those sorts of scenarios for many people. You should be doing that to look after yourself, just like you should be brushing your teeth, just like you should be doing many things every day. People don't, they get away with it for so long, and then they don't, right? And I always remember a case of, I was watching a late night TV show. It was a clip of a late night TV show, not that I watched this, it was from a while ago. And the presenter said to the guy, who was an older man, he said, he was talking about smoking a cigar. And he said, what does your doctor think about you smoking a cigar a day for the last X number of decades? He said, I don't know, my doctor's dead. That's not a smart answer. It sounds cool, right? But that's not a smart answer. Just because someone else gets away with not doing things and doesn't seem to have problems according to you, doesn't mean that it's the optimal solution. Just because there are people that don't work out, doesn't mean that you need to take that as, oh, well, I can work, why can't I as well? We should all be doing strengthening work. Yes, we call it rehab, but you're doing strength training. What we take people through in the program is strength training, but strength training sounds scary, so you call it rehab. It's the same thing, by the way. There is no difference. And so you continue that for the long term, just like you're probably going to continue brushing your teeth for the long term. And if you don't, well, you won't need to for a long time, for a period of time, because you won't have any left. You know, there's that kind of thing perhaps to think about as a crossover example. As for the hot and cold, you know, the benefit of doing that does start to become less so, I would argue, the further on you go through the recovery process. And often people will find I just can't be bothered anymore because I don't feel like it. I don't feel like I need to anymore. You know, and that's perfectly reasonable. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense, Johnny. Thanks for the question. Any tips and explanations for lateral pelvic tilt causing back pain? Lateral pelvic tilt does not cause back pain. Lateral pelvic tilt is likely to be there in consequence of a back injury. And I would argue that a lot of people will have some degree of lateral pelvic tilt anyway, because very few people actually stand square. Very few people stand like the soldiers on Horse Guards Parade. Most people stand on one leg versus the other. So when they do stand like that, they actually realize they have a pelvic tilt. People get way too uppity about this pelvic tilt and that lean and that twist and that this, that, the other when they have a back injury and start trying to fix that while they simultaneously can't even do a simple squat with body weight without messing things up, right? We're majoring again in minors, trying to fix the glute medius imbalance from left to right. You know, forget about that. Focus on doing the squat, the hip hinge, the step up, those other exercises that we talk about. And once you can do those to a good level and you've demonstrated appropriate competence at those, appropriate ability, then reevaluate whether you still have a significant disparity from one leg to the other. And then you might go about trying to change that. But if we can't even effectively, perform a hip hinge with body weight, why are we trying to mess around with something that requires quite a lot of precision and athleticism? I think it's just putting the cart before the horse. Megan has said, I had a microdiscectomy, 2nd of April, still in pain, but not reherniated. What can I do? You need to do the rehab, Megan. The microdiscectomy chops this bit off here. This bit was not the problem. That was a problem, but it's not the problem. The problem is the fact that your disc was like this and you had the bunch of annulus ligaments, annulus fibrosis. All of those have been broken through as this broke through them. And the surgery does nothing to fix those. That's what your rehab does, supports the recovery process, which your body is naturally trying to do every single day. Megan, check out the link in the profile page up on TikTok for a link. There's a video there that explains more about the program. Guys, I'm getting towards the end of the live stream, coming up to the hour mark. You guys have been throwing in a few more questions towards the end. Hopefully it's been helpful for you guys. I'll keep going for a little bit longer and then we're going to call it a day. Opinions on back extensions to help with the disc bulge, I think do hip hinges. If we're talking specifically, JC, about the back extension machine, that is something that is, I think, unnecessary. Just focus on a hip hinge. All you're doing with a back extension machine is adding in obstacles to doing a simple hip hinge. And I don't think you need to be doing extension, as in moving beyond neutral into the extended position for your recovery. You should be focusing on a neutral position. Yes, extension is better than flexion, but for most people, no, for everybody, but the neutral is what we're looking at. We're not talking about doing extension, we're talking about doing neutral. And so the hip hinge is there. Often the back extension, you mean the back extension machine where you've got a bench and you're then going over like so. It's just a unnecessarily complicated way of doing exactly the same thing, but making the exercise less applicable to daily life. So I think the back extensions, quite frankly, are a bit of a gimmick. That's not to say they can't work, right? Because you're essentially just doing a hip hinge. And if you do them correctly, they can help you. But why you need to go and use a specific piece of equipment when you could just do it standing up is beyond me. I don't understand it quite frankly. Megan has said, "Can I speak to you personally?" Megan, we inside the membership we have a members area where we have people posting questions, comments all the time, feeding back with you guys. We also do the members only live sessions every Wednesday, where we're doing those kind of things, and new members that join can get a virtual consultation. They can go and book one of those in. When you go to checkout, you can add a virtual consultation, or you can book it at another time. You can go back and do it later if you feel the need. But I will say most of the people don't need that. You just need to do the rehab work. Because quite frankly, it's as if you're speaking to me when you're going through the rehab work. There's literally, we just rolled out over 250 new videos to the membership. Like, that's way more than you could ever cover in a consultation. It's my brain in video form telling you the stuff that you need to know to fix your back pain. And you can access it anywhere in the world at any time of day and get the answers there and then. Like, it is the future of the way in which these things. Too many people are stuck in the old way of, I'm going to go and see Michael. You know, for example, we get patients that come here to the clinic, but they're coming in. We're spending an hour together. I can't cover all that material. I can't cover 250 videos in an hour. But that's what you need. You need all of that. So you can cover that in your own time, and you can get all of that information no matter where you are in the world. All of the pricing information and everything is all on the website. Just go link up it here in the profile page and you can check it out. But it's if you're in the UK, it's £15 a week. If you're in the US, it's $20 a week. Like, people spend more than that sometimes on coffee, right? It's very, very accessible to many, many people. I think you'll find, as a lot of the members do, that like there's nothing else like it in terms of the robustness, the structure, the support, and all of that kind of stuff. And one of the important things is, like, you can stay with us as long as you want. If you want to be with us for a month, you can be with us for a month. If you want to be with us for longer, you can be with us for longer. We get some members that, you know what, actually it's just a bit above their budget, so they join for a month and they go away, do their own stuff, then they come back a couple of months later, go through some more of the material, and then go off somewhere else. Leanne, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Leanne. Leanne said, definitely recommend the program. It's really helping me in acute pain. Just steady progress, Leanne. Working on the exercises, getting the videos in, getting the feedback, going away, doing the work, jumping back in again, and we'll work with you guys as you go through the process of getting better and better and better. Habia Ba has said, do you do a personal consultation first when you join? You can do, but quite frankly, well, two things. Number one, you can add it to the checkout when you sign up. But even if you do, the suggestion, the strong suggestion, like, man, I wouldn't do that if I were you, is not to book in the consultation for a couple of weeks. Why? Because there's no point us talking about stuff that is covered in the educational material that you can cover already. And that's the biggest problem, is that there's so much stuff there to help you guys doing even this kind of stuff, like live on TikTok and on YouTube, to level up your understanding so you can ask better, more impactful questions. It's no good you going, should I go and use an exercise bike for my back? Because if you've covered the educational material, you would know that that makes zero sense. And then instead you'd be going, I'm actually here on the exercises. I need strategic help with getting to the next level on the rehab. And that's where actually a consultation is really fun. It's really enjoyable, because I know that you've done the work to educate yourself, covering all the material, and then we go and we have some really interesting discussions that actually move the needle on your recovery. Whereas if you pay for a consultation and you go through it at the first instance, like without having covered any of the educational material yourself, we're just covering the basics. And quite frankly, it's not very good value for you, and it's not as fun for me either. Whereas when you get people that book the consultation a little bit later, we can actually really move the needle. People ask really good questions on the lives and all that kind of stuff. It's really good fun. It's really good fun. Andy, sorry, I do talk a little bit too fast. I'm working on it. But when we get close to the end of the live, like we've overrun, and I'm trying to just get those extra little bits in to help you guys, I tend to speed up the pace. I do apologize. If you watch these back on YouTube though, you can slow the video down to 0.75 speed. It's something I'm working on. Gary, I'm going to finish with this question. What is the best core work for strength? I think he's saying core work for strength. people often, you're excited, what are you talking about? Yeah, I'm too excited. The best core exercises for building your strength back up in your spine are the squat, and I'd probably say the squat and the hip hinge. Why the squat? Because people think, oh, well, it's a dead bug exercise, or it's another core exercise. You speak perfect pace for people with attention problems. maybe I've got my own, who knows? Anyway, as is evident, by the way, I'm back and forwards with this question. People don't realize that the squat is a great strengthening exercise. We used to get this before, but a lot of our members now know. The squat is a great strengthening exercise because you better believe the role of your core is not to do this and touch the floor. You don't contract your abs and go like this. So why do people traditionally think, I'm going to do my sit-ups to strengthen my core, right? That's not what you do. Your core is a stabilizing structure that stabilizes you and brings you back to the center when you do things. Yes, okay, maybe you do 10, 100 dead bugs. But if you could squat 100 kilos, who has the stronger core? The guy that can do 100 dead bugs probably can't squat or bear the load of 100 kilos, but the guy that can do 100 squats can very quickly learn how 100 kilos on the squat can very quickly build up the strength to be able to do the dead bugs. We take the example of two extremes. We take the powerlifter. Let's say we take Half Thor, who just broke the world record for a deadlift. I think it was 510 kilos, absolutely an incredible amount. And you take the Pilates instructor. Thor will be able to transfer his strength and spine stability over to do what the Pilates instructor can do way before the Pilates instructor is ever going to get anywhere close to that kind of loading, that kind of strengthening. Squats are a core exercise. If you do not use your core when you are doing a squat, you will buckle like a wilting plant. The squats demonstrate strength in the core, on the front of the core, the side of the core, the back of the core, and the core of the core, which is your spine. Someone with a very loud motorbike outside. So that's why I think the squat is probably the best core exercise. Additionally, because it is transferable to everything you guys are doing every day. So the squat is a technique that you're also learning that is useful when you come out of surgery, that is useful when you're rebuilding, getting back into the real world, that is useful when you're trying to build full resilience in your lower back. Squat and the hip hinge is in close, kind of first and second there, I would say. And yes, they don't have asymmetry, but you've got things like the step up, the split squat, the single leg hip hinges for those kind of things. Hopefully that's been helpful, guys. Hopefully that's been helpful. I'll be going live again probably on Thursday or Friday this week. For those of you that are members, we're going live tomorrow, lunchtime. The notice will go out, the link will go out. And guys, if you do find this helpful, please do consider sharing the channel, sharing the YouTube page. I know many of you guys on TikTok have been tagging me in other people's videos to help them. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Take care, guys. Secret lab. I feel a lot stronger, more stable while squatting. Yeah, it's just practice, practice, practice. And the idea is that your squat becomes so second nature. That's how you get up and down out of chairs, etc., etc., etc. Everything just becomes a lot more subconscious, so that we move in ways that are more optimal. So thanks for that one there. And Johnny, speech speed is good. Thank you. I appreciate that. We get it occasionally. Some people are saying that I speak too fast. Some people say I speak too slow, and everybody in between. Guys, have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, see you next time.